Hi, everyone. We're back. We're talking about mindfulness today, and we have a very special guest who is an expert in this area. Marcy, welcome. Would you take a moment to tell us something about your background?
Yes, good morning, and thank you so much. And also thank you for the opportunity to talk about the direct connection between the mind and the body, because it is a powerful connection that directly impacts our physical and our psychological health. So I'm a bioenergetic therapist. I have a private practice here in Kansas City. I've also created and am teaching a curriculum helping healthcare professionals learn how to work in the nervous system of a person to help them bring their body into a more regulated, calm state.
That's fascinating. So you mentioned you're a bioenergetic therapist. You have done a lot of work in this area. You not only practice bioenergetic therapy, but you also have developed a 2-year course on this topic, which is fascinating. But most of us are not really up to speed on even what this is. Would you take a moment to tell us what that is?
Sure. So and by the way, I get asked that probably every day. The short answer is that bioenergetics is the very specialized form of mind-body therapy that focuses on defensive postures. So what that means is ways that the mind and body have developed mostly unconscious patterns to hold a person in a safe or protected state. So the drive to be in that safe or protected state could come from a real or a perceived threat. It could come from an experience that occurred long ago. It could come from belief systems and projections about fears in the future, but it keeps them in a threatened state. Mm-hmm. So they've developed patterns in their mind and their body, and I'm trained to look at those patterns. So things like muscle tension pattern, breathing pattern, nervous system reactive patterns, and patterns in the flow of the electromagnetic energy within the body.
It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I don't think anyone today could dispute how the mind and the body are connected. We've heard a lot, of course, in the last several years about PTSD, and that's trauma. But I also think that most of us suffer trauma sometime in our life. And so it's
Absolutely
just
true.
more severe in some than others. And yet some people, for some reason, manage that trauma better. I don't know if they're compartmentalizing that in a way that's been easier for them to deal with than others. And yet it can be the same trauma. Why is that? Why is it that we're different in how we manage that stress?
Yeah, honestly, I have come to recognize that it's not about comparison.
Yes.
So you don't want to look at one person and say, well, their trauma is so much worse than mine, and then begin to minimize your own experience.
Yeah.
It has much more to do with how a person has learned to be present in a moment of an experience, and whether that experience has been frozen before its completed cycle.
Interesting.
Right.
So basically, people kind of put it under the cover, so to speak, because they don't want to deal with it, consciously or unconsciously, and that can create other problems.
That's one way of expressing it. Another is to recognize that we can freeze in a moment, or we can decide I need to fight or run, or we can collapse in a highly stressful moment. And all of those come from, more often than not, early childhood patterns that have been developed.
Yes.
Whatever our response is, if we have frozen an experience and it's not completed through the cycle so that we can come back out of stress and into a calm state, that's traumatic.
And sometimes what we perceive as trauma in reality may not be a big trauma, but if we perceive it as such, it's every bit as real.
It's absolutely right. To the mind, what we are thinking is real.
Yes.
Which is a really exciting thing to know, because it's empowering. We have a tendency to think, I feel something, and then start generating thoughts to support the feeling. But research has actually shown us that what we think affects our neurochemistry.
Absolutely.
And it's our neurochemistry then affects our emotions.
Yeah.
So it's really empowering to know I can go in and shift what I'm thinking about an experience, and that will shift my neurochemistry.
Isn't that brilliant? It's so exciting. It's so promising, because things that we may feel like we're at a dead end because we've faced a trauma, and we feel stuck there. But the reality is, if we become proactive in managing that, then we can move past it by how we decide to manage that truth in our lives. And I guess that's where, as a bioenergetic therapist, you step in to help people understand how to better manage that trauma in that case. That's so interesting. So we know that a lot of people who are clinically obese have suffered massive trauma. But I'm going to go back to, again, the reality is that we've all suffered some trauma in our lives, for sure. But very often, trauma is a very big part of that. Can you speak to that?
Oh, absolutely. And you're absolutely right about the fact that we've all experienced some type of trauma.
Yeah.
Which does create reactive patterns in our nervous system.
Yeah.
So just a little bit of information about trauma and the brain. When we continue to tell a certain story in our mind, it's as if we're reliving the trauma. So we're creating neural circuits in the brain that are re-traumatizing us.
Isn't that
and
amazing?
over time, if we continue in that stress response to the experience, our prefrontal cortex actually shrinks, our amygdala actually shrinks. So the ability to have reasoning is reduced.
Yeah.
And there's a heightened response to any type of situation or trigger that feels somewhat similar to the experience that we were in.
So they're reliving basically the trauma.
Yes. So when you hear the words, the story you tell yourself, it's really true.
Yeah. And it may not be a true story. It may be your perception.
It's the perception based on certain belief systems, certain fears that may be carried forward, but certainly not based on the moment.
Yeah.
So that's part of what we do. We help the body, we help both the mind and the body feel safe enough to let go of those defensive postures I was talking about, so that they can allow what's in their subconscious to come up to conscious awareness, which is mindfulness, and then begin to look at, is that true in the moment?
Yeah.
So it's all about being in the moment.
I'm so fascinated with this topic, and I'm so grateful that you're here to tell us about it today. So for someone of our viewers that are hearing this today, maybe they don't have access to you. Can you talk about the things they can do to overcome, perhaps, or to become aware of what those blocks might be in their lives and what they can do to overcome those things?
Yes. In my belief, the biggest motivator is intention. Someone has to have the intention or desire to shift the situation that they currently find themselves in.
Yes.
Once you've developed intention, then there are some things that you can do at home. Some people need some support, and that's why we have people like myself providing support as they're learning how to do this on their own.
Yes.
But there are some things. There is vagus nerve regulation. So the vagus nerve is the first responder in the nervous system to any type of stress. And I can demonstrate if you'd like to. There's a really useful tool that you can use to bring yourself back into the moment and bring your nervous system calm when you know you're in a stress state. So you can place a hand across your chest, take a nice deep breath in, exhale out, and then either look around yourself or sense around yourself, because we have the ability to feel around us, and ask yourself, in this moment, is there anything threatening me to the point that I need to run or fight?
Right. No.
99% of the time, the response is, no, there really isn't.
Right.
Which lets you know, okay, I'm having a reactive pattern to something that has occurred in the past or that I'm afraid will occur in the future.
Brilliant.
But let's come into the moment. And you can feel the nervous system begin to calm down the minute the mind can recognize there's nothing threatening.
It's amazing.
So you feel the body respond and calm, and then you put your other hand across your abdomen.
I want to do it this way.
Bringing the breath is a useful tool to bring truth down into the body. So you bring down into your body, there's nothing threatening me. And then you sense around yourself again in this moment. Is there anything overwhelming me to the point that I just need to collapse?
Mm-hmm.
And more often than not, again, the answer is no, there really isn't. And you can literally feel your vagus nerve regulating your nervous system to come back in the moment and recognize I'm safe.
Yeah.
Once you can do that, you can get still enough to start listening to things like, what are the thoughts running around in my head?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also start listening to body signals.
When we talk about mindfulness and all of the science that you've just shared with us, we know that chronic inflammation is the foundation for nearly every chronic illness.
Right.
And so when we consider what you shared, and we know our minds can literally make us sick, and we can get ourselves so stressed out and throw our whole body out of sync. And so the reverse is also possible. That's what I think you're sharing today, is that we can get control of these things. And I think it's incredibly important that we respect and accept the link between our minds, our brains, our minds, and our bodies, so that we can feel empowered to know that we can change that situation.
Yes. Empowerment is a big word here.
Huge.
So it is not uncommon for people to feel helpless
Yes.
and stuck.
Yeah.
And it's very empowering to know we can change this reactive pattern that we're in.
Yeah.
So we do know that chronic prolonged stress does a lot, and internally in the body, including throwing the endocrine system completely
Totally.
off balance.
Yeah.
So meaning cortisol's running through our blood vessels.
Yeah.
Cortisol increases inflammation. It thickens the blood vessels so that eventually it can lead to high blood pressure.
Yeah.
Stress also impacts our immune system.
Yeah.
Chronic prolonged stress causes the immune system to release a chemical called a cytokine.
Yeah.
If we have that coursing through our body consistently, it creates chronic pain.
Yeah.
So, we have a big issue with things like fibromyalgia.
Yeah.
And the belief with fibromyalgia clients is that there's nothing I can do about this. And interestingly enough, the thought or the fear of pain becomes just as real as the pain. So there's this
Absolutely.
negative loop that's occurring in the body.
Yeah.
So what we do, and especially in the course that I teach, is learn how to bring the nervous system back down into the calm state. Because when the nervous system comes into a calm state, the brain sends signals out to all the body systems, hey, we're calm. So the things like the endocrine system can then rebalance and quit coursing chemicals through the body that are creating the inflammation.
All the things you just mentioned that go wrong in our physical bodies, right, that often start with the mind. We think about diabetes, heart disease, liver disease, all of the hormonal imbalance and all the things that can lead to. It's the gears of the body. And that's what this 10-step series, Intentional Health, is about, is these 10 steps that we know if we can just even make small improvements in each of these areas, it's incredible how much our lives can change for the good. And so I love this topic. I think that there needs to be so much more research in this area, because we tend to see research based on pharmaceutical funding, right? And this is not an area that they're funding research in.